It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10. Our top story. Rishi Sunak faces a TV showdown with other party leaders amid a deepening Conservative election betting scandal. The Tories' head of campaigns takes a leave of absence as his wife, a candidate, is investigated by the Gambling Commission.
I want to be crystal clear that if anyone has broken the rules, they should face the full force of the law, and that's what those investigations are there to do, and I hope that they do their work as quickly and as thoroughly as possible.
Look at the gambling stuff that's going on today. Politicians who think that making money or self-entitlement is the reason they're in politics.
We'll be live in York to get the reaction to that leaders' event and those challenging questions. Also tonight, England falter in Frankfurt but sustain a draw against Denmark. And we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages in our press preview from 10:30 right through to midnight. Good evening. Don't put money on things getting any better for the Conservatives' election campaign. 2 weeks from polling day, tonight Rishi Sunak faced angry questions from a live audience after it emerged his head of campaigns and his wife, who's a Conservative candidate, are being investigated over election day bets. 4 leaders from the main political parties appeared in York tonight for a special BBC Question Time event. We'll bring you live reaction to assess how they performed. But first, Sky's deputy political editor, Sam Coates, has this report.
And answer questions from our audience.
The final fortnight in an election that keeps going in one direction. 4 party leaders facing the voters of York. But the growing Tory betting scandal means an awkward backdrop for just one of them. The audience demand answers from Rishi Sunak.
Aren't these emerging allegations about betting on the election date the absolute epitome of the lack of ethics that we have had to tolerate from the Conservative Party for years and years.
Well, like you, I was incredibly angry to learn of these allegations. It's a really serious matter. You know, I want to be crystal clear that if anyone has broken the rules, they should face the full force of the law.
These are party candidates. But you're happy not to suspend them, to let them carry on and go on to the election?
What I can tell you is if anyone is found to have broken the rules, not only should they face the full consequences of the law, I will make sure that they are booted out of the Conservative Party.
The Prime Minister asked to account not just for what has happened under his government, but the turmoil under his predecessors as well.
We've had 5 Prime Ministers in the last 7 years, and one of them managed to last for 6 weeks. As a result, I think we are something of an international laughingstock. I'm asking if you would confess to us tonight, even just a small amount of embarrassment, to be leading the Conservative Party into this election campaign.
You may remember I spent the summer before that arguing against the policies that my predecessor had suggested were right. I didn't think they were right for the country, and I said so. But what I'd ask you to do is judge me on my 18 months that I've been in office.
A week on, and the man in pole position for number 10 in this election still facing the same question on why he said Jeremy Corbyn would be a good Prime Minister. But now, a new answer.
Look, he would be a better Prime Minister. Well, look what we got, Boris Johnson. A man who made massive promises, didn't keep them.
Changing his mind was a theme the audience kept coming back to.
You criticise your MP, Rosie Duffield, for saying only women have a cervix. You recently backtracked on this. What do you believe now?
Well, look, on the biology, I agree with what Tony Blair said the other day in relation to men having penises and women having vaginas. But what I will say is
so
this...
So you changed your position?
Just on the biology, that doesn't help on the gender. There are some people who don't identify with the gender that they're born into. And they go through a lot of anxiety and distress. And my view in life is to respect and give dignity to everyone, whatever their position.
This man may be riding high in the polls, but the Liberal Democrat leader confronted time and again about his record in government.
Isn't the problem, though, Ed, that you've got a credibility issue? We all remember the broken promise on tuition fees. You enabled Cameron and Osborne's austerity. So I don't think people are going to be convinced by what you're saying he'll do now.
Well, listen, those were... I have to say it was very difficult governing with the Conservatives. We couldn't get everything we wanted. But we were faced with a choice as a minister. You either had to stay in and fight inside the government or leave. Look, I'm not proud of some of the votes we did, Fiona. I'm not proud of them.
All right.
And I want to overturn them. And a lot of our policies are changing some of the things that we had to agree to back then.
The SNP leader also having to account for the recent failings of his party.
It has been a turbulent time, and I'd be the first to accept that and to admit that. It's my primary duty as First Minister of Scotland to make sure that we change lives and to improve lives of people in Scotland. And I've set that programme out by establishing a focus on eradicating child poverty, on achieving the transition to net zero, on strengthening the Scottish economy and improving our public services. And by doing that, I hope to rebuild the trust of people in Scotland, which I accept the SNP has got to earn on a constant basis.
Elections determine the future, but this audience wanted each man to talk about failings in the past, watching with a sceptical eye. Do they and the nation beyond believe what they hear? Sam Coates, Sky News, York.
The Conservative Director of Campaigns, Tony Lee, has taken a leave of absence. It comes after it emerged his wife, Laura Saunders, a party candidate, was being investigated by the Gambling Commission. She's the second Conservative candidate now known to be facing a probe over allegedly betting on the timing of the election. And Sky News understands more names are set to come out. Our political correspondent Rob Powell reports.
A Tory attack ad aimed at Labour, but now deleted from social media amid a scandal over Conservatives placing bets on the timing of the general election. Laura Saunders is the second Tory candidate to be investigated over money allegedly being wagered shortly before the Prime Minister called the vote. She said she'll cooperate with the Gambling Commission inquiry. Her husband, Tony Lee, has also taken a leave of absence from his job as the Conservative Director of Campaigns. For ministers trying to construct a comeback 2 weeks from polling day, it's an extraordinary development.
Well, I'm almost lost for words, I have to say. You know, obviously, I've got to wait for these investigations. We've all got to wait for these investigations to conclude. But I think you shouldn't be using inside information to try to make a few £100 on the side. That is just not acceptable.
All quiet at Tory HQ, but if anyone was found to have used confidential inside information to make bets, they could be found criminally liable. The Labour leader also campaigning on housing, not hesitating to build a political attack.
This candidate should be suspended. And it's very telling that Rishi Sunak has not already done that. If it was one of my candidates, they'd be gone and their feet would not have touched the floor.
2 weeks from polling day, this betting scandal is another unwelcome development. Yes, it distracts from what the Tories want to talk about, but it also hones in on existing attack lines waged against the Tories of greed, sleaze and cronyism.
And it's not just those from the party being looked at. One of Rishi Sunak's close protection officers has also been arrested and suspended for alleged improper election gambling. Data from the website Betfair shows a spike in bets being placed on a July election, with thousands of pounds being wagered a day before Rishi Sunak announced the vote. This academic, who has studied political gambling, says lots of factors can lead to an increase in betting activity.
Some people will be working on inside information. They might be getting it from the kind of vibes that they receive in conversation with other kind of political activists or with politicians, but also people study polls really extensively. But what counts as inside information is quite a murky field.
What's an example of something that might go wrong?
The Prime Minister now has his answer. With 13 days until polls open, this is another setback Rishi Sunak can ill afford. Rob Powell, Sky News in West London.
Let's go live to that leaders' event in York and to our Deputy Political Editor, Sam Coates. It's all over now. Sam, you saw them all speak. How did they do?
Across 2 hours in front of an audience here in York, Gillian, each party leader faced questions not about the future, but about the past. A weary, sceptical audience throwing questions about why the leaders had flip-flopped, why the leaders had backtracked, things that the leaders had done in their past and the problems caused in the last few years. Clearly a sense in this audience's mind that British politics has gone awry in recent years. And no bigger example of that is the growing scandal that is engulfing the Conservative Party tonight, the betting scandal with the news that candidates put money on the date of the election, that the Director of Campaigns in the Conservative Party has had to resign from his post 2 weeks before polling day because his partner put money, it is alleged, on the date of the election. And Rishi Sunak tonight coming out with his first response to the latest round of allegations. Now, Rishi Sunak came and told the audience that he was incredibly angry. But, Gillian, there was an important point of difference between him and Labour. Labour is demanding to know why Rishi Sunak does not suspend the candidates, the 2 candidates alleged to have put money on the date of the election, possibly with, this is what's being investigated, because they had inside information. Rishi Sunak declined. He promised to boot them out and insisted that he was angry if they are found guilty. But I think this question, why they haven't been suspended, when so many Tory MPs have been suspended in the past simply for allegations being raised and before formal allegations have been have been proven will now dog him for some time to come. But every single one of the four leaders faced challenges, whether it was Keir Starmer on his support for Jeremy Corbyn. It was interesting that for the first time to my ears, he suggested that Jeremy Corbyn was better than Boris Johnson. I haven't heard the Labour leader say that before, whether it was John Swinney, the leader of the Scottish National Party, being challenged on the turmoil that the SNP has seen over recent years, or Ed Davey being forced to account for his role in the coalition government. Each leader faced probing questions from a weary audience wanting to know why this crop of politicians have behaved as they have. Now, I'm joined by the first of the people who are going to evaluate and help me understand what their side was up to in that debate, and that is David Davis. Yes, if you just here. David Davis, do you think the Prime Minister did well tonight?
Yes, I did, actually.
Unlike the audience?
Well, the audience, he took on some of the arguments. I mean, you've got an audience which is basically a fraction allocated according to the people who are addressing them. So it's not sort of statistical, if you like. But, you know, Keir Starmer...
He was the only one that was booed.
Let me finish. Keir Starmer, when he was given a difficult question, basically changed the subject. I can point you to 3 or 4 times that happened. Rishi took them on head-on sometimes, arguments that were really quite controversial arguments. The argument on the European Court and migration being the latest one, tax being another one, and he took them head-on. He said, look, this is what I stand for, this is what I've delivered, this is what I intend to do. And bear in mind, I mean, I've been around long enough, I can remember Thatcher. If Thatcher had delivered a reduction of inflation of 11% to 2%, she would have given her right teeth for that.
But you had an audience. But you had an audience that were heckling at points. They were mocking laughter. There was clear unhappiness there that I didn't see for the 3 other party leaders.
Well, that's partly because they didn't take the issues on. They didn't answer. I mean, you talk about Swinney. Swinney didn't give us a single answer. You've got criminal charges being brought against the ex-head of his. So
the reaction of the audience was a triumph. The reaction of the audience was a triumph. It was
what I said to you is you've got supporters of each of the 4 parties being represented. There. 3 of the 4 parties didn't like the answers. Of course, because they're controversial issues. The issue of migration is controversial to Labour because it wants not to do what we're talking about.
We've got limited time. I want to just focus on one thing. Tonight was the first time that we had seen Rishi Sunak since more allegations came out about the betting scandal, which is currently engulfing your party.
Well, engulfing? How's engulfing?
Rishi Sunak is... Rishi Sunak, you have got 2 candidates who are being investigated for putting bets on the date of the election, possibly a criminal offence. Rishi Sunak is refusing to suspend them. Why is that?
Well, because we believe one of the institutes, I mean, I'm famously a supporter of human rights, one of which is the presumption of innocence until proven guilty. These people, some of them, will be facing criminal charges. You don't step in at this stage, in the middle of an election, when they're the only candidate there as well, and say, right, I've decided you're guilty. Because that's the implication of suspension. I am a critic, by the way, of what you mentioned earlier, people being suspended on accusation. I don't think it's a good idea. But here, it's very clear.
But there is one rule for some people. So Mark Menzies, Crispin Blunt, they were suspended on allegation, not when they were found guilty. Now we're in the middle of an election campaign. The Prime Minister seems to be operating under different rules.
There are 2 things. Firstly, there's a possible criminal charge. If you interfere in a possible criminal charge, that's quite a serious action in its own right.
Suspension.
Let me finish.
No, suspension is quite common.
Let me finish. This is a Prime Minister here. You don't, as a Prime Minister, step in and interfere in a criminal process. No matter how embarrassing it is, and it is, no matter how angry it makes you, and it makes me angry too, you don't interfere with that. That's called British law, it's called British justice, and frankly, it's about time sometime journalists paid attention to that.
Rishi Sunak has suspended people facing investigations in the past. He's choosing not to do so because he is very close. One of the people involved...
Facing criminal investigation?
Mark Menzies?
Criminal investigation? Is he in front of a criminal court? I don't think so.
There was a suggestion of police investigation at that point, and he was suspended. Rishi Sunak is refusing to suspend his closest aides.
It's nothing to do with the fact that his aides or not his aides. Some of them are and some are not. But the simple truth is that it's the middle of an investigation. And I expect my Prime Minister to uphold the law and treat people as is proper in British justice. And I'm glad he did that. I'm as angry as anybody about what's happened, or what appears to have happened, but let's see the outcome.
Bit of a pattern, though, isn't it?
No, I don't know what pattern you're talking about. Again, you're trying to make a story out of this which is not there. This is an important piece of justice. Innocent till proven guilty, and you don't interfere in an ongoing criminal investigation.
David Davis, thank you very much indeed. There is David Davis giving his verdict on the debate that we've heard. So we're now going to hear, you heard from David Davis about what was going on, what his view of the betting scandal. Let's just hear that answer quickly from Rishi Sunak when he was pressed on the betting scandal.
Well, like you, I was incredibly angry to learn of these allegations. It's a really serious matter. It's right that they're being investigated properly by the relevant law enforcement authorities, including, as Fiona said, a criminal investigation by the police. You know, I want to be crystal clear that if anyone has broken the rules, they should face the full force of the law, and that's what those investigations are there to do, and I hope that they do their work as quickly and as thoroughly as possible. All I can say is they are serious investigations. It's right that they are done thoroughly, confidentially. The integrity of that process should be respected. But what I can tell you is if anyone is found to have broken the rules, not only should they face the full consequences of the law, I will make sure that they are booted out of the Conservative Party.
So that was Rishi Sunak saying that anyone found guilty of those offences will be booted out. Rishi Sunak would have 4 party political leaders to be appearing before the question time answer audience today, along with Keir Starmer, Ed Davey and the SNP leader, John Swinney. And it's that performance that we're going to talk about now. I'm joined by Stuart Hosey from the SNP. I mean, you must find it fairly depressing that John Swinney's having to just answer question after question about SNP turmoil over recent years. That's just dogging and, frankly, ruining your election campaign, isn't it?
No, it's not, but I think the point you made in your introduction about 5 minutes ago was all of the leaders faced tough questions, quite right too. And, you know, we've been honest, I've been honest, John was honest tonight. We took a dunt over the last couple of years. Even at the start of this election campaign, a whole 3 weeks ago, we were behind in the polls. Now, since then, we've caught up with Labour in Scotland. A number of polls show us ahead, so we've given ourselves a platform. And I think what John laid out today was we've actually got an alternative to the kind of Brexit austerity Westminster system. And that's the message I think he got across rather well.
But the conduct of Nicola Sturgeon, other party officials, Humza Yousaf, they are the things that loom largest in... the SNP, the former SNP First Minister. They all loom large in the minds of voters at this election.
I think some of this is really important for people who are interested and care about this, absolutely. And we want our politics to be as good as they can be. But at this election, and this is coming across loud and clear, it's the cost of living crisis which is the issue. It's a decade or more of austerity which is the issue. It's the threat to privatisation, to the NHS. That's the issue. So the other stuff is real. I'm not going to dispute that. And we've got to take that head on. I believe John did today. But more importantly, it's getting across the key real issues, and how we're going to address those.
Do you think he set out a case that a vote for the SNP will bring you any closer to independence, given that you're unlikely to get more than half the seats in Scotland at this election?
I would dispute that. As the campaign director, I am not going to sit here and say we're not going to win. We're trying to win this election. We've won the last 3 UK general elections, 15, 17 and 2019, and we're trying to win this one as well. And the manifesto's clear. You vote for us, it's a mandate. But the key point John made today is the Scottish Parliament, with an overwhelming majority of MSPs who support independence and a referendum, that mandate must and should be respected by the UK government if they're democratic at all.
But I think the point tonight was if you get less than half the MPs in Scotland at the forthcoming election, that's a vote by the Scottish people against independence and to stay part of the union, isn't it?
I think the objective is to win the election. Now, I'm not going to stand here today as the campaign director and say we're not going to win. We are trying to win, and we are still trying to win every single seat. Now, whether we do or not, whether we win the majority or not, time will tell. But we are trying to win this election. And given there's a majority of the Scottish people support independence, I think it's quite clear now as they watch these programmes only a vote for the SNP provides the mandate and keeps independence alive.
Stuart Hosey, thank you very much indeed. Now, I'm in a very busy spin room here in York. There's an awful lot going on. My colleague John Craig is just a matter of metres away, and he's got some very important people to talk to. John, where are you?
Thank you, Sam. I'm at the other end of the room from you, and from the, I suppose, the other end of the political debate, I've got Jonathan Ashworth, the Shadow Paymaster General. You're going to tell me Sir Keir was brilliant. He struggled with the questions about Jeremy Corbyn, though, didn't he?
Well, I thought Keir showed strong leadership tonight. He talked about his plans to fix the problems in the National Health Service. He talked about his plans to help young people get on the housing ladder. So I thought you saw from Keir Starmer a strong performance in contrast to a very weak performance from Rishi Sunak, who refused to take away, to kick out of the Tory party these two candidates who were engulfed in this gambling scandal tonight.
But he did say, didn't he, that if they'd done wrong, they'd broken the law, he would kick them out. He said he was incredibly angry, and he did say he'd kick them out.
He should suspend them now as candidates, and he should tell us who else has placed bets in this election. Has he asked other candidates? Has he asked his cabinet ministers if they've placed any bets? Has he asked his senior staff if they've placed any bets? This is a scandal engulfing the Tory party, just like the PPE scandals, just like the parties in Downing Street scandals, and it reveals, as always with the Tories, they think it's one rule for them and another for the rest of them. If he had any backbone, he would be kicking these candidates out.
But let's go back to Sir Keir, because I want to ask you about this Jeremy Corbyn question. He struggled with it when we had our Sky News event in Grimsby last week, and he struggled with it when Fiona Bruce repeatedly said to him, why did you say Mr Corbyn would make a great Prime Minister? He completely dodged the question. He looked shifty when he refused to answer that question.
No, I don't think so. And I think if you're a member of the Labour Party and have been a Labour Party member and supporter all your life, you're always going to campaign for the Labour Party in general elections. But here's the thing. Keir Starmer has changed the Labour Party. Jeremy Corbyn isn't a Labour candidate in this election. Liz Truss is a Tory candidate. These two characters involved in this scandal are still Tory candidates. That's the difference between Keir Starmer's strong leadership and Rishi Sunak's weak leadership.
You say that, you would say that, wouldn't you, of course, but I come back to the point of going back to Mr Sunak. What did you make of the audience shouting shame when he talked about a foreign court? And it was pointed out to him that, of course, it was a British judge on it, and also Britain was, I think it was the Attlee government after the Second World War, wasn't it? Was it Ernest Bevin? I'm not sure. You tell me. Were involved in setting up the European Court of Human Rights and the Convention.
Well, I think tonight Rishi Sunak was exposed as having no answers for the big challenges facing the country. The only policy Rishi Sunak was able to announce tonight is that young people who refuse to take part in his national service will have their bank account taken off them. That seems to be his only policy he had tonight. The truth is this: Rishi Sunak has got a long wish list of a manifesto, billions of pounds worth of commitments he cannot fund, from savings he cannot find, the money is not there, and Rishi Sunak, if he gets 5 more years, will make the same mistakes that Liz Truss made, push up borrowing, and British people will be paying £4,800 more on their mortgage. In the end, if you want to bring an end to that chaos, you've got to vote Labour, and I think Keir Starmer convinced a lot of people in the audience tonight.
We heard from Mr Swinney earlier that it was a racing certainty that Sir Keir would become Prime Minister. Do you worry that all these polls talk of a supermajority, which Conservative politicians like Grant Shapps have talked about, and the SNP, and indeed Nigel Farage saying the election's over, Labour have won? Do you worry that voters might stay at home and say, we don't need to go out and vote?
Well, the only poll that matters is election day. Or if you've got your postal vote, send it off, send it back if it's turned up on the post.
It was Mrs Thatcher who used to say, the only poll that matters is...
Well, she didn't do too badly at winning elections, did she? To be fair to her. Look, the key thing is this, right? I think these polls are nonsense. These polls, they're just wild.
Wild?
They're wild. They're complete nonsense. The reality is, if you want to see the NHS fixed, if you're a young person who wants to get on the housing ladder, if you want to give our children breakfast clubs in schools and recruit more teachers, if you want to cut energy bills for good, you've got to get out, and you've got to get out and vote Labour on July the 4th.
I think that you've made that quite clear. Jonathan Ashworth, thank you very much. Well, Jonathan Ashworth says the polls are wild. Back to you, Sam.
Thank you, John. Thank you, John. We have been asking our voters panel about the gambling allegations. It's the voters panel we've been doing with YouGov. Let's see what those voters had to say about it.
As the alleged insider gambling scandal deepens, the Sky News YouGov voters panel reacted. Their verdict, damning.
I'm absolutely disgusted. It's made me not want to vote for Rishi Sunak and dislike him even more because there's no morals there.
This is the final straw. I think this is over. It's unattainable now, and Rishi Sunak should step down, and the Conservative Party has to start all over again.
For dyed-in-the-wool Tories, it probably won't make a lot of difference, but I think for people who might be wavering, it might sway them towards Labour or, worst-case scenario, Reform.
Even without the betting probe, the polls weren't looking positive for the Tories. These are the 2019 constituencies our voters panel represent. And this is what the latest Sky News YouGov poll predicts will happen. It suggests 22 of the 40 seats could change hands, the majority flipping from Conservative to Labour. Voters in these seats aren't surprised.
Most people in the area are expressing a change from Conservative because they've made such a mess of things.
I am surprised at the how radical it is and how it's predicted they're going to take so many seats from the Conservatives.
This makes me inclined to even more vote for Reform, for the opposition to the Labour, because I really don't want Labour to get in.
The poll also predicts Tory losses to the Lib Dems.
I think just with the way that the national sentiment is, I think that people here are likely and inclined to vote Lib Dem rather than Conservative. I'm still undecided personally, and I'm still waiting to really make my mind up.
Even in true blue seats staying Conservative, some of our panel unimpressed and undecided.
I think the options really do range from completely incompetent through to downright deluded. And so I still haven't made up my mind. And to be honest, I really would like a none of the above option.
Polls can predict, but it's people who decide. And that day's still 2 weeks away. Laura Bundock, Sky News.
So you hear the despondency there of voters, not least about the betting scandal. Have any of the four party leaders appearing here in York been able to convince voters that they might be able to offer more hope? Well, let's do a bit more chewing over of tonight's event in York. I'm joined by a couple more politicians, Munira Wilson from the Liberal Democrats, Bim Afalami from the Conservatives. Bim, to you first. The Prime Minister had a very tough time today. He's engulfed in a betting scandal. The audience looked sceptical. They look more sceptical about him than any other party leader. It's a difficult night.
I don't think it was a difficult night. I think the Prime Minister performed incredibly well. I think that, yes, you're right that the news of the day was difficult, but look at the performance the Prime Minister turned out. It was strong, resolute, decisive, clear. At times, was willing to do that thing that people like you will always say politicians don't do, which is challenge the audience, say where he disagreed. And actually, what I heard at the end was an audience that saw a guy, the Prime Minister, at the top of his game, serious and understanding the challenges that the country faces.
Eric, your party leader has been slightly riding high in the polls with the projections of maybe more than 60 seats. He got a really difficult ride from the audience as well tonight, challenging over his backing of austerity, his regret for how he betrayed promises in the past. People aren't all that convinced, are they?
Well, look, on a programme like this, I think every party leader expects to come on and answer tough questions, and Ed rightly addressed them. I was really proud, actually. He showed his humility and he recognised where mistakes had been made, how the party had listened and learned, and that's then reflected in the manifesto that we've set out at this election, where we've set out a series of policies with health and care front and centre, which are fully costed and we believe fully deliverable.
Bim, the big story today is the betting scandal. Why on earth has Rishi Sunak not suspended the two candidates involved?
Well, you heard the Prime Minister earlier on. There's an investigation going on. When that investigation concludes, we'll know who's innocent or guilty or what the determination is. And at that point, if people are found to have broken the rules, they will be booted out of the Conservative Party, in using the Prime Minister's own words. I think that that's fair and a reasonable way to behave.
On plenty of occasions before, Rishi Sunak has suspended people on the basis of allegations rather than a fully completed process. Mark Menzies, Crispin Blunt. Is it a different set of rules simply because this includes one of his closest aides?
No, that's completely wrong. It is unusual.
Why is it happening?
Okay. It is unusual because we are now in an election period. It is different when Parliament is sitting. We're in this election period. Nomination papers are already in. This is a different period and quite a challenging way to deal with administratively if you're making those sort of judgments. The Prime Minister has therefore made the correct judgment to say, look, there is an independent investigation going on.
Hang on, so this is about an election? This is about because there's an election on?
No, it's because the times when you're describing, it was a qualitatively different time because Parliament is sitting. It is different when Parliament's not sitting.
He could say today, I will not hand the whip to either of these two candidates if they are elected on July the 4th. Very simple. Why isn't he doing that?
Because you need to allow an investigation when they're very serious allegations. It's got to allow an investigation to play out. And I think that is perfectly reasonable. If they're found guilty or that they've broken any rules, then they'll be dealt with.
Yeah.
Well, today we heard Rishi Sunak say he was angry about what had happened. If he was truly angry, he would have suspended those candidates. But, all he's worried about is protecting those around him that are closest to him. And instead, he should be really angry about the state of our health service. And I think that doctor...
So would Ed Davey have suspended those candidates in similar circumstances?
Yes, he would.
What do you say to that?
Well, I mean, I'm not going to say anything about Ed Davey.
No, but there are other politicians who say you absolutely could be suspended. Prime Minister's just ducking it.
He's not ducking it. He's been very clear. And, I think the whole country's heard his answer.
Bim, Manira, thank you very much indeed. There you have it. We have the four party leaders of the four biggest parties facing an audience. Tough ride for all of them, particularly Rishi Sunak facing those questions over the Tory betting scandal. You heard his first answer this evening. He's angry about it, but he is still refusing to suspend the candidates. Back to you, Gillian.
Sam, thank you very much for all of that. Well, that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's newspapers in the press preview. Tonight, we're joined by political commentator Benedict Spence and journalist and author Christina Patterson. Amongst the stories we'll be discussing, this on the front of the Eye. Its headline, Betting Fast derails Tory campaign amid fears more names will emerge. Do stay with us for more on that story and others. We'll be right back. Welcome back. You are watching the press preview. A first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. It's time to see what's making the headlines with political commentator Benedict Spence and journalist and author Christina Patterson. They'll be with us from now until just before midnight. So let's see what's on some of those front pages for you now. Well, the election betting stories on the front of the eye. Betting fast derails Tory campaign amid fears more names will emerge. From the Financial Times, a flurry of bets on July election placed in the run-up to Sunak's announcement. The Times has a response on that from tonight's TV event. Sunak vows to boot out Tories over poll betting. And the Metro's headline, what a flutter shambles. There's another headache for Rishi Sunak in The Guardian. New blow for PM as former Labour minister says he will vote Labour, Conservative minister that should be. And the Daily Mail is focusing on Sir Keir Starmer's performance in tonight's event with a headline, Corbyn would have been better PM than Boris, Keir claims. Away from politics, on the front of the Daily Express, thank you, you saved our son's life. A new treatment for cystic fibrosis. And a reminder that by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers while you watch us. And we are joined tonight by Benedict Spence and Christina Patterson. Welcome to both of you. Let us start with the Daily Mail. And Sir Keir Starmer has been forced to talk about Jeremy Corbyn in a positive light. Quite uncomfortable questioning for him, but he did say that he would make he would have made a better Prime Minister than Boris Johnson. That was his way of getting out of it.
Yes, I mean, this is his absolute Achilles heel, the Jeremy Corbyn question, which he hasn't yet come up with, a story for. It's evident why he did what he did. He wanted Labour to run the country and he wanted to lead Labour. And the only way he could see of doing that was by holding a cabinet post and to get the necessary experience. And the only way he could get the necessary experience and hold a cabinet post was under Jeremy Corbyn. And by the rules of the game, on collective responsibility, you can't stand there during an election campaign and say, oh yeah, my boss is useless. Obviously, I didn't think he should go anywhere near Downing Street. So that was probably his biggest compromise, and it keeps coming back to bite him. I don't think he actually did think Jeremy Corbyn would make a great Prime Minister, although I have to say, I mean, I can't stand Jeremy Corbyn. I also can't stand Boris Johnson. We don't actually know that Jeremy Corbyn would have been worse than Boris Johnson because Boris Johnson was pretty awful. So I'd say the jury's out on that. But yes, it's very awkward for Keir Starmer. I think apart from that, his performance tonight wasn't too bad. But yes, he's always going to get this question and he doesn't have an answer for it.
It definitely is his Achilles heel, as Christina says, isn't it, Benedict?
It is, because it's very difficult in politics to sell to the public the fact that politicians are incredibly ambitious and can be rather Machiavellian about getting to the top of politics. Nobody's going to be honest about that, but I think it's very clear from the outset that Sir Keir Starmer always had his ambitions, as Christina says, and has been very successful at getting into a position now where he is on the brink of being able to give the nation his vision. For that, he's had to use the coattails, if you like, of Jeremy Corbyn being Labour leader. It did well for him, and it's also politically, I think, rather sensible that he's moved to distance himself as much as possible over the last couple of months and years from that Labour leadership because it was so toxic. As to the question whether or not he would have made a better Prime Minister than Boris Johnson, well, of course, a Labour leader cannot sit there and say, yes, a Tory would have made a better leader than a Labour leader. That's a very odd thing to sit and say. I think Christina's right in that sort of hypothetical situation is a rather difficult one to judge because you don't know what he would have done in most situations. But there is one thing that I probably would touch upon and say that I think Boris Johnson did a better job than I think Jeremy Corbyn would have done, and that would be the immediate and sort of full-throated support for Ukraine. Given what we know about Jeremy Corbyn's position on pacification and on relationship with various countries, I don't think you would have seen the amount of diplomatic, financial or military hardware support given to the Ukrainians by the British government, which the Ukrainians are the first to say above anybody else. Actually, that was the sort of the bridging effort that helped the Ukrainians stave off the Russians, whilst the rest of Europe and the United States were getting their act together. Actually, that initial intervention was incredibly important to determining the outcome of a conflict with global ramifications. So on one thing alone, I would say probably yes, Boris Johnson did a better job than I imagine Jeremy Corbyn would have done in this weird hypothetical situation.
I agree with you.
Let's move on to the Financial Times and the alleged betting scandal that Conservative insiders bet on the date of the upcoming election and bet on the exact date of July the 4th. This is the accusation, and they're being investigated by the Gambling Commission.
I mean, this is just breathtaking. Apart from anything else, it's breathtakingly stupid because the amount of money that they were likely to have made from this, it's not a life-changing amount of money. I cannot think of a more idiotic thing to do than to abuse your position and go and place a bet to get a few £1,000 and risk not just losing your job, but to totally further trashing the reputation of the Tory party. Tonight, when Rishi Sunak was asked about it, he had a face like thunder. And I mean, look, I think the campaign has been disastrous. I think Rishi Sunak has handled it badly, but I don't think the polls are about Rishi Sunak. I think they're about 14 years of absolutely disastrous Tory government. But I felt so sorry for him at that point. Just the last thing he needs is yet more breaching of ethics on the Tory party, and that's what he's got. I do think it symbolises everything that has just been completely void of morality about the Tory party, and it's disgraceful.
So Keir Starmer's saying that they should be expelled or dropped, certainly, from running for office. But Rishi Sunak is saying that, you know, he needs to wait for the investigation, innocent until proven guilty.
Well, give it a couple of weeks. They'll be out of a job anyway. So it's, you know, I think, honestly, though, I would echo what Christina has said, which is that these are allegations. This is an ongoing investigation. But if it is found that these people have broken the rules, there's two Tory candidates and the head of the campaigns for the Tory party. This shows, I think, as much as anything else, how out of touch they are, not just in terms of the general public, but in terms of what it is that a political party needs when it's about to call a general election, which is all hands on deck, which is everybody pulling in the right direction, not going out to get a little dopamine hit, because that's what this amount of money is. It's a little personal thrill. You feel like you're beating the bookie by, you know, sticking a few £100 on and getting a couple of grand back. That's what it is. But ultimately, what does it show you? It shows you broadly that people were not taking this seriously. Because of the numbers, actually, that are involved, potentially, of people who might have placed bets, it also shows you that it was far from watertight in terms of naming the date, because obviously somebody said to somebody and then lots of other people had the same thought. It just shows the complete lack of discipline from people who... One of these people who is alleged to have done this is in charge of the Tory party's campaigns. They were supposed to be focusing on rather more important things. Clearly, they were not all pulling in the same direction. How on earth can Rishi Sunak expect to even rescue a semblance of respectability in a campaign where the first thought that a lot of people have is, do you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to have a little bit of a flutter, and I'm going to tell this person to have a bit of a flutter, and they'll then tell this person. It's just the breakdown of really basic discipline. And what I would say is, I don't think that this would happen in Keir Starmer's Labour Party, or actually in previous versions of the Conservative Party. And I think it's just a reflection of the breakdown in discipline that this was allowed to happen.
Yeah, Benedict and Christina, we're going to leave it there and take a break. Thank you very much for the moment. Much more coming up, including the review of England's performance at the Euros. We'll have more on that and other stories. Do stay with us.
It's a very complex and mysterious condition. Quite often it's very difficult to diagnose. People get wrongly diagnosed. It's similar to certain other conditions. So it's great that they're making some progress. I doubt that it'll be very soon before lots of people are offered this test, because just think about it. Who would want suddenly to decide to find out whether they were likely to get Parkinson's or not? But I think it will be part of this whole effort to understand what's going on in the brain what is causing those dopamine cells to die and whether anything could be done about it. We are seeing a couple of very promising new drugs at the moment, but as you heard there, they're obviously being tested on people who have already got the condition. If you could test it on people who didn't have but were susceptible to the condition, that would be very interesting indeed. So I was on holiday with my wife and I kept dragging my leg. And then in the September, I was on the BBC holding a cable up in a report on broadband on Jersey, and somebody did write in saying they'd noticed a tremor there, and I ought to get that seen, see a neurologist. And I had actually already made steps, but it kind of confirmed me in my suspicions that what was revealed a few months later, that yes, I did have Parkinson's disease. And there it was diagnosed by basically a consultant stretching my arms this way and that, making me walk around the office, doing various exercises, getting in and out of a chair, almost kind of a pretty crude test. And later that was confirmed by a scan, what's called a DAT scan. But so if a blood test, when you were showing symptoms, could make that process simpler, that too would be helpful. I'm 5 years in. The first three or 4 years seemed relatively good. I had a bad fall last year, which I don't think was to do with Parkinson's, but it took me down a step. So I'm now finding it a bit harder to walk. I've got more mobility problems, and there's other factors as well. I sleep terribly, and there are various things that are sort of what are called non-motor symptoms. But I'm on medication. I've got friends with whom I make this podcast. We get quite a lot of laughs out of it, as well as the odd moan. So I can't complain, really.
Welcome back. You are watching the press preview. Before we go on to the papers, let's talk a little football, because there's frustration for England fans tonight after Gareth Southgate's side were held to a 1-1 draw by Denmark at the Euros. England have one group game left and are all but certain to qualify for the knockout stages. But once again, there are questions over whether Southgate is getting the best out of his team. From Frankfurt, our sports correspondent Rob Harris reports.
This match day began with so much excitement and expectation for the three lions in Frankfurt. And for this clash of European monarchies, the Prince of Wales was in the stands with Denmark's king. It was England, though, that had the look of football royalty. A confident start crowned with a goal from Harry Kane.
And a big chance for Kane!
Sending beer flying in the air back home. But soon they were drowning their sorrows. We've seen this before with England losing leads. Too sluggish, too sloppy, and too much space for Morten Hjulmand for this stunning strike. Denmark were level at the break. England had lost control. This, the response. Tame from Declan Rice. Power from Phil Foden, but denied by the post. Then a rare bold call by Gareth Southgate. Captain Kane off in a triple change with more than 20 minutes to go. An injection of energy, and Ollie Watkins immediately stretched the defence. But a winner couldn't be conjured. They just protected a 1-1 draw, leaving to some boos from fans.
We know the level has to be higher. We know the level can be higher.
maybe the biggest thing is we have to accept the environment that we're in and the expectations that are around us, and we're going to have to walk towards that challenge. At the moment, we're falling a little bit short of that.
So boring, sideways, just no attacking intent. Disappointing. Lacklustre, no charisma, just changes at the wrong time again. Just had enough.
We've got the players, but we're just not doing it to play as a team.
This has been another performance raising questions about whether Gareth Southgate can get the best out of such a talented group of players. But they should have done enough already to get through to the last 16. Now it's about whether they'll still be able to go through as group winners. Point shared and hug shared.
I'm so sorry, man.
Yeah? Well done.
Yeah, it's not coming home.
Are you happy? Are you happy with your result?
Yeah, semi.
Yeah?
Semi.
I'm not happy with our result. We should do better.
Yeah, you should definitely.
Champions of Europe, you'll never sing that.
They know what it's like to win this tournament. Will the Three Lions ever? Rob Harris, Sky News, Frankfurt.
Well, still with me, Benedict Spence and Christina Patterson. You were giggling at the end of that there.
Yeah, it's sort of a running joke that everybody who ever seems to play in the Euros seems to win it except us. You know, the Danes have won it, the Greeks have won it, absolutely. Anybody can just rock up and have a go. It's just us that ends up losing. So it's very amusing to hear the Danes singing Champions of Europe, you'll never sing that to us. Really, really nice.
Maybe this is our time. Maybe this is our time. But what did you think of the game? 1-1. I mean, it's not a loss.
We're not going to win the Euros, he said, tempting fate. But it's a very depressing thing to see the same mistakes being made over and over again. I'm not going to get too deep into the tactics on the press preview. I'm going to spare people that. But ultimately, Gareth Southgate, he's a very nice chap. He's not a bad manager. But he fundamentally gets the balance of his teams wrong every time. And that's why they play very dull football. They're better than their opponents because of the natural talent that they have, but they are disjointed. So it's very frustrating to see that, you know, he's been around for some time now. I think this is his second or his third Euros, and they're still making the same mistakes. And when you look at, for example, the way that the French play very high tempo, or the Germans play very high tempo sort of counter-attacking football, it's very frustrating to see. We have all the players that can do that, the same sort of talented players, but we don't play the same sort of way at all. There's no evolution, there's no sort of fluidity. So we aren't going to win this tournament. The odds are, sadly, it's probably going to be France or Germany. The more I tempt fate, the more likely it is to happen. And if we don't win, then I'm right. So I'm in a win-win situation.
Put some money on it.
If I was a Conservative, I'm right. But you're a big football fan, aren't you, Christina?
I'm a massive football fan. I'd have to disagree with your discussion on that. All I know is that there was a cheer from downstairs earlier and from next door, and then by the time I left the house, my husband was in a foul mood and said, you know, he was going to have a horrible evening. And I was trying to explain that it had nothing to do with him, but, you know, whatever, people don't grasp it. It's funny, I mean, I'm a big fan of Gareth Southgate. I have zero sense of his football tactics, obviously. Lovely man. But I'm fascinated by how he did such a great job last time round and apparently isn't this time. And is he being kept on because he's so nice? Surely someone who is not doing a good job, it's a pretty ruthless game, would have been got rid of by now.
Again, Southgate there because he's too nice.
Yeah.
Christina and Benedict, thank you very much for taking us through the papers. We'll see you at the top of the hour.